And so I would like to introduce our first speaker to this wonderful class, Sriman Yasodananda Prabhu, who is just all in all a wonderful devotee, and not only that, but he's just so wonderful to work with and do seva with. And it's not just a seva relationship, you know, he really encourages you to go deep within your bhajan and reflect on your own bhajan and sadhan. So I'm really grateful to him for being such a wonderful god brother of mine. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sriman Yasodananda Prabhu. Haribo. You're on mute. And I didn't mute.
That might be the best way to offer my Pushpanjali, actually. Just to add a couple of points on there, as well as having New Zealand and Australia devotees and the West Coast of America, we're going to have wonderful devotees from Hawaii as well, because Hawaii's got a lot of incredible devotees hiding out there. Was that? You're on mute. I can't hear you.
I said, isn't that in America? But I'm just, let's not talk about.
Yeah. No, it's not West Coast America. It's right in the middle of it's right in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. So as I normally do, I'm going to give you I'm Dr. Spock on Star Trek. So I always tell you where we are in the human day, in the day of Brahma, because we're doing 64 glorifications of Gurudev, starting sometime, I don't know, late last year. I can't remember when we started, and I've actually got down with, we're on 28, although you said 27, but never mind, that's how I worked it out. So on the 28th, as we're on the 28th, by the end of today, we'll be at the equivalent of 10:30 a.m. human time. But in terms of the day of Brahma, I've actually done myself a little spreadsheet on this now, which I'm very excited about. I can share with any fellow geek. We're on the 7th Manu out of 14, the 63rd Chatur Yuga. We're in the Satya Yuga, and we're 1.296 million years into the Satya Yuga. Well, hopefully, what I'm now going to talk about will make a little bit more sense. I invoked at the beginning, but I just want to add, I want to pay my humble obeisances to Shri Radha and Krishna, Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, the whole of the Parampara, Srila Prabhupada, my beloved Gurudev, and all devotees who are present, and all good devotees who are going to listen or watch this recording later. So our beloved and sweet Janardhan Prabhu, please pray to him, because I was talking to him last night. He does wonderful, wonderful seva. And oh, by the way, Yashadari, I've got my egg timer for timing. Yeah, so I'm going to start the egg timer. So it's a half-hour egg timer. So our beautiful Janardhan Prabhu, who's based in Seattle, he does incredible seva and has a very beautiful, humble mood. And anyway, he has something going on linked to a ice hockey accident he had many years ago, and his symptoms last night seemed quite serious, actually, and he wasn't quite sure if he could make it or not. And the fact I can't get hold of him right now tells me he's probably ended up in hospital. So let's all say a special prayer for our beautiful Sevak brother with a big heart, Janardhan, that it's not too serious, and that Gurudev will protect him both spiritually and materially through whatever he's going through right now. I hope it's just a little hiccup and not anything more significant than that. So, Srila Gurudev, I want to set the scene. The scene is 1996. No, actually it was 1997, because I first met Gurudev in 1996 in February in Mathura, and my first parikram was that Kartik parikram, and then I went to the next Navadvip parikram, which was in 1997. And at that Navadvip parikram, I remember firstly, after the parikram, it was sort of dusk time, and it was darshan time with both Srila Bhakti-Vedanta Vaman Maharaj and also Gurudev. So we all shuffled past Vaman Maharaj, who was kind of almost in a state of samadhi. Actually, he didn't talk. He was behind a mosquito curtain, and it was very very profound experience, actually. And then after we filed through Vaman Maharaj, we went to Srila Gurudev. And Srila Gurudev, and Namgir Mohini and I, my ex-wife and I, we'd given a nice donation. But Gurudev said, he kind of implied, donation's nice, this is your saver. But then he got out this red cotton sewn heart, and he had us look at this heart that he brought out, and it was so beautiful and so simple. And he put the heart in his pocket, and he's basically saying to us, I want to take your hearts. I'm going to take your hearts. I'm putting your hearts in my pocket, because he was putting our hearts in his pocket so he could take them to his Swamini, Radha, Sri Radha. This was the meaning of it. And this is the extraordinariness of our Gurudev. You know, you got to consider that I wasn't just a neophyte devotee, I was a real, dumb devotee, in the sense that I knew nothing. I just about knew the Maha Mantra. I don't think I'd even read the Bhagavad Gita. I think I'd read the Krishna book, and that was about it. I really knew nothing. But somehow, right at the beginning, literally in the first maybe 18 months, even in that first tour that we went on with Srila Gurudev in '96, because we met him in the February before this episode I just related to, shared with you in Navri. We met him in '96 in February, and then we sponsored his visa to come over to the UK after Holland, and then we ended up going across America and following him on part of his first world tour. And I remember back then getting this whiff, this sense, this seed in my heart of this Manjari Bhav. And you've got to remember, someone who just about chanted the Maha Mantra and maybe had read a couple of books and that was it. How would I relate to something like Manjari Bhav? I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense that I could even get a sense of that. But somehow, and I don't know how, he managed to place the seed in my heart that this is the goal of bhakti under his guidance, under his anugat, which is obviously a word that then I didn't know. But by faithfully following him, he would take us under guidance in a very specific mood, so that he could realize in our hearts our real swarup of Manjari and the real glories of the praying that already is existent in our hearts of Manjari Bhav. So to do that and to give that sense of that seed of a concept into a heart that was so undeveloped like mine back in '96 and then '97 is really an extraordinary, very mystical and very spiritual accomplishment, which then has meant that everything since then has been an unfolding of truth and ras. So you know how in many parts of our texts it talks about in the Bhagavatam and the Gita, it talks about the flowery words of the Vedas. You know, as a Westerner who doesn't read Hindi, Bengali, or Sanskrit, to have a view of the Vedas, to enter the Vedas without context, without guidance, is a recipe for deep, deep confusion, which is actually why so much of yoga, general yoga practices in the West have become very confused, very proliferated, but very confused. Somehow Gurudev was able to always create a framework in my heart, a sort of a context for how all the knowledge that was coming into me, whether it was through classes or whether it was through reading or whether it was through just discussions with devotees, he somehow gave me that overall framework into which everything else could make some kind of sense, as opposed to just being a jumbled array of ideas that were disconnected. Everything had this connection because he had put in my heart this verse, which I now have some more understanding of, which I had no understanding then, of Anyablasta Sunyam Gyan Kamadhyana Anukalenya Krishna Shilam Bhakti Uttama. So although that wasn't a verse that I could recite or translate back then, it was a verse whose meaning he was emphasizing and re-emphasizing all the time. What is the nature of our swarup? What is the nature of what's the constitutional nature of our eternal character in the spiritual world? And therefore, how are we evolving towards that destination? So it's specifically, and he's very renowned for this because Gurudev always used to host a 4-day festival for the disappearance day of Rupa Goswami, because of course we are serving as Manjaris, our potentiality and seed is to be serving Srila Gurudev as Manjaris, and he's serving Rupa Manjari, who's serving the Gopi Lalit, who's serving Swamini Radha. And so Rupa Goswami is the lotus feet in one of his favorite bhajans, Gurudev's favorite bhajans, is holding onto the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami, Rupa Manjari. That is his life and soul. That's our life and soul. And so one of Gurudev, I mean, he had many things, so many things you can glorify Srila Gurudev about, but he's taking that heart that he gave to us back in Navri, was saying to us, I'm going to take you to Rupa Manjari. I'm going to take you to Lalita. I'm going to take you to Swamini Radharani. And that's why he glorified Rupa Goswami so extensively. And I was thinking about this, I was thinking how absolutely incredibly beautiful this is, because if you work right from the top, Krishna, and Gurudev would say this, Krishna would be zero without Radharani. There would be no Ras without Radharani. But there would be no understanding of the moods between Radha and Krishna if it wasn't for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So without Radha, we have no access to Krishna. Without Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have no access to Radha and Krishna. In the same measure, without Lord Nityananda, who broke the dam of Prem in Godrum, there would be no merciful, infinite, merciful, bounteous flow of grace in this world if it wasn't for Lord Nityananda. So we wouldn't have access to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu if it wasn't for Lord Nityananda Prabhu. Now, to equal measure, we would actually not understand the heart of, not that I understand it, but we would have no ability to understand, no access point, no portal to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu if it wasn't for the writings of Rupa Goswami. Thus, Gurudev's great worship and love and desire to hold on to the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami is absolutely essential for our teachings, and it's a speciality of our Srila Gurudev. So in Madhya Lila, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 13, you have the ecstatic dancing of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at the Ratha Yatra. And within this dancing, which many of the people, the contemporaries of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, while Mahaprabhu was singing this song, many of them didn't understand what he was singing, except Swarup Damodar. And what he was singing was, because Lord Jagannath is in the mood of Dwarka, Mahaprabhu was singing in the mood of Radharani, saying, oh, yes, I'm seeing you in this, like I'm at Kurukshetra, because that's a Dwarka mood, but I long to be on the banks of the Yamuna with you. So he was invoking that mood of Radharani, of reminiscing and lamenting to be in Braj with Krishna. That's where she wanted to be, like, oh, you have forgotten the beautiful inhabitants of Vrindavan. This is where I want to be with you. And if you fast forward to Antya-lila chapter 1, verses 78 to 79, Rupa Goswami writes the following verses. He says, but actually I'll go back to verse 75, just read 4 verses. It says, generally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recited a verse while dancing and chanting before the Ratha Yatra, but no one knew why he was reciting that particular verse. Only Swarup Damodar knew the purpose for which the Lord recited that verse. According to the Lord's attitude, he used to quote other verses to enable the Lord to relish mellows. Rupa Goswami, however, could understand the intention of the Lord, and thus he composed another verse that appealed to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That very personality who stole my heart during my youth is now again my master. These are the same moonlight nights of the months of Chaitra. The same fragrance of malati flowers is there, and the same sweet breezes are blowing from the Kandamba forest. In our intimate relationship, I am also the same lover, yet still my mind is not happy there, not happy here. I am not happy in Dwarkamud, in Kurukshetra. I'm eager to go back to that place on the bank of the Oreva under the Vitasha tree. That is my desire. And then Mahaprabhu continues, my dear, or Rupa Goswami continues expressing Mahaprabhu's mood. My dear friend, now I've met my very old and dear friend Krishna on this field of Kurukshetra. I am the same Radharani, and now we are meeting together. It is very pleasant, but I would still like to go to the bank of the Yamuna beneath the trees of the forest there. I wish to hear the vibration of his sweet flute playing the fifth note within that forest of Vrindavan. Then verse 80 says, after writing this verse on a palm leaf, Rupa Goswami put it somewhere in his thatched roof and went to bathe in the sea. And at that time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went there to meet him. And when he saw the leaf pushed into the roof by Rupa Goswami and saw the verse, he began to read it. And after reading the verse, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was overwhelmed by ecstatic love. At that time, Rupa Goswami returned, having finished bathing in the sea. Seeing the Lord, Sri Rupa Goswami fell flat in the courtyard to offer obeisances. The Lord slapped him mildly in love and spoke as follows. He said, so Mahaprabhu talking to Rupa Goswami, he says, my heart is very confidential. How did you know my mind in this way? And after saying this, he firmly embraced Rupa Goswami. And he later said he showed the verse to Swarup Damodar and said, how did Rupa Goswami understand my heart? So this is the great speciality of Gurudev, is emphasizing the importance of Rupa Goswami and unpacking Rupa Goswami's teachings for us. It's called in theology an eschatological process. An eschatological process is a series of aligned or arrayed or organized theological understandings or scripture that has a kind of a crescendo, a final purpose. So say in the Christians, they have this sort of idea of it's very external. Some of the evangelical Christians have this idea of a rapture, the idea that one day, there's a day of judgment and all those who are saved, they get somehow pulled up to heaven, and all those who are damned stay on the earth. Our spiritual process is much more subtle and sublime than this. Our eschatological process is the crescendo, the intimacy, the final destination point is in the intimacy and relationship in the kunj with Radha and Krishna. And this is what Gurudev came to give, to emphasize the importance of understanding the mood and the heart of Nityananda Prabhu, to understand Mahaprabhu, and thus to understand our Swamini Radha, thus understanding the relationship between Radha and Krishna, so ultimately we can really serve them in the spiritual world. And this is why, although he would still, express the importance of the process as delineated in Madhura Kandambini of going through the anartas, there was a great emphasis also on the artha pravritti side of our process, as well as the anartha nivritti side. So anartha literally means, artha means that which has wealth in your heart, and anartha means that which has no wealth in your heart, and nivritti means to clean or remove those things in your heart that have no wealth. So it's a bit like, I was thinking about this the other day, how when an aeroplane leaves the docking station in an airport, if it has too much weight, too many bags, too many people, too much fuel, when it taxis along the runway, it cannot take off. So these anartas are like weights in our heart holding us down. So we need to lighten our load so that we can get skyborne. Yeah. But and that's why a powerful Gurudev like our Gurudev is able to help us. If we go to him with our anartas, he's able to help us lighten the load in our heart so we can take off in our bhakti more easily. But on the other side, the artha pravritti side, which means putting into the heart that which is wealthy, he's emphasizing the teachings of Rupa Goswami, because the teachings of Rupa Goswami, if you read plays like Lalit Madhava and Vidagda Madhava, and all the writings of Rupa Goswami, because of course Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he only wrote 8 verses in total. It was Rupa Goswami's job to write prolifically, from which so much of our latter literature has come from, interpretations and reinterpretations of the same literature written by Rupa Goswami. So Gurudev is an absolute master of the manifest and unmanifest universes in this respect. He's left us with a legacy of literature through his own writings, a legacy of teachings through his own classes that glorifies Rupa Goswami as the bestower and the person who is able to really go into Mahaprabhu's heart and pull out all the beautiful rasa tattva, so that we can really authentically enter into that meditation. Because that's where, going back to what I said at the beginning, Gurudev said to me, he said, I want to take your heart. I want to take your heart to Vrindavan. I want to take your heart to my Swamini Radha. And the way he's doing that is he's doing that by sharing with us and helping us understand the absolute central importance of Rupa Manjari in the Kunj, serving Lalit, serving Radha and Krishna, or serving Radha to serve Krishna. And in this world, he's emphasizing the importance of Rupa Goswami's teachings, so that we can get that mood from Gurudev, so that our seva, so that our sadhana can be imbued with that mood, and then our seva can be imbued from what we're doing in our sadhana. Our seva then benefits from that mood as well, which then means that everything becomes sort of congruent. It means that the river is flowing down in one direction. It's not getting dissipated through lots of different rivulets. It's not leaking out here and there. It's one pointed. It's anugat. It's following one mood, and it's not just following. It's not like following just one dogma. It's a very sweet mood, and you notice it that in devotees that are devotees of Gurudev, even if people are not that absorbed in the rasa teachings of Gurudev and of Rupa Goswami, there's something that Gurudev has transmitted into all of our hearts, which is a kind of a desire for the spiritual perfection, while at the same time a kind of a liberality in the sense of always trying to see one another for our best, the best in one another, rather than pointing out the faults. Because when you're someone like Srila Gurudev, and he's giving us, even though I'm a very rascal devotee, and I realize I don't deserve to be an entrant to any of this knowledge, and yet I also know it doesn't matter that I am not qualified, because my Gurudev is qualified to give it to me irrespective of my qualification. And what Gurudev does is, because he's giving us access to the infinite prema and love in the relationship between Radha and Krishna flowing through the whole parampara, because he's giving us some access to that, he's creating this enormous context for us. So you know what it's like when you have when one gets stuck in the mundanities of life. Someone slights you, someone says something you don't like, and or something goes wrong in one's life or in some relationship, and it's very easy to get sort of burdened and bogged down in the pedantic sort of annoyance of life as a conditioned soul. But what Gurudev has done is he's created such a huge movie of love that actually, as soon as you put your head out the window instead of staying inside your own house, it's kind of like your own little cave of ignorance, you see there's this window that Gurudev has created, and you pop your head out and you go, wow, the sky is so big, it's so blue, it's so infinite. This beautiful love that he's given us access to in the spiritual world is so extraordinary. Why would I look at the one black spot on the cloth of the other person when I can look at all the white parts? Or even if all you can see is black and you can see one white spot, why wouldn't I just concentrate on the white spot? So this all, although it's very high philosophy that he's given us, and Rupa Goswami is so esoteric and so subtle and so brilliant and sometimes you read some of his writings and you think, wow, I think I only got about, 0.5% of that. There's something that is transmitted into our hearts that Gurudev has, which is this broad-mindedness and this tolerance that comes from saying, well, actually, the transcendental world of love is so relishable, so beautiful, so rich, that if I contextualize these small so-called material difficulties in this world within that greater context, within that greater game, that greater goal of Manjari Bhav, why am I getting het up about this or that or the other? Taktetnu kampam. Yeah, I can tolerate my karma if I understand that the game is so much bigger than this small time material world. There's so much more to play for. And Gurudev has given, that's why he said to us, you may helpless, yes, but never be hopeless. How can any of us be hopeless? Because we have Srila Gurudev who's taking us home. And I think this also beautifully reconciles the relationship between Srila Gurudev and Srila Prabhupada, because I was speaking to a Prabhupada disciple some time ago, and this person was telling me how, I think it was in the early 90s, Gurudev came to Krishna Balaram, and what this person heard Gurudev say was, oh, your Prabhupada, he's focused on seva, 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 and now it's time to kind of stop doing seva and go deeper into your sadhana. And this person, he wasn't unfavorable to Gurudev, but he wasn't favorable either. He just didn't get it. He didn't understand that Gurudev and Prabhupada, they're so one and different. Like in the same way as I was explaining how without Radha, there's no Krishna. And without Mahaprabhu, for us, there's no Radha and Krishna. And without Nityananda, there's no Mahaprabhu. And without Rupa Goswami, there's no Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And without Gurudev, we wouldn't have the access we have to Rupa Goswami, not because Prabhupada wasn't realizing all these things. Of course he was, and more so, I mean, totally so. I mean, that's the world that Prabhupada comes from, but because all these acharyas, they come with a different mission. They come with the same mood, but different mood, a different emphasis. Prabhupada had to start something from nothing. Literally, there was no infrastructure, there was no organization, there was no temples, there was no books, there was nothing. It was just a desert. And who did he have to work with? Well, half the time, most of the people that he was dealing with were on drugs, literally on drugs. And Prabhupada had to start a movement, literally, from what, you have 6 or 7 rupees in his pocket and about 1 contact in the whole Western world. And he created something from scratch. So, of course, his emphasis is going to be on that external seva. He had to get everybody fired up, making it all happen. But then years later, when so much has been done, Gurudev's coming along, as Prabhupada actually did in his own lifetime. I think when ISKCON reached 10,000 members, Prabhupada said, I'm paraphrasing rather than quoting, he said something like, he said, enough now, we need to consolidate, it's time to churn the milk, rather than growing. And Gurudev comes along, and he's the fulfillment of everything. If any of you watched, I think it was Bhagavad Maharaja's glorification of Gurudev, actually, or it may have been, thank you, boil the milk rather than churn the milk, quite right. It may have been on this program, or maybe it was on another program, but it was a beautiful, because Bhagavad Maharaj was actually there when Prabhupada disappeared, and he was explaining how Prabhupada's communication interaction with Gurudev was so beautiful, and how Prabhupada whispered certain mantras into Gurudev's ear. It was very, very beautiful. And so you can see how in the same way as one personality is unpacking another personality, you can see how Gurudev is taking the very teachings of Prabhupada, and he's saying, now you've done this, now it's time to go. Instead of building above the ground, you got to go down deeper into the foundations. That's what he's telling us. Sadhana and seva, not only the seva. Go deeper, not just in the quantity of the rounds, but in the quality and on the yearning for the ultimate. Don't get distracted by Vaikuntha or Dwaka or Mathura mood. We want the Braj mood. And there's no way that we could access this Braj mood if it wasn't in the same way, with this emphasis, with this sweetness, if it wasn't for the emphasis that Gurudev put on it, and the emphasis that Gurudev has for the teachings of Rupa Goswami. So it's very important that we understand one of the, I mean, Gurudev came to the West for many reasons, but it's very important that we understand all aspects of Gurudev's life's work. You know, one aspect is the propagation and intensification of the Navadvip Parikram, and also the Kartik Parikram. He built that over many years. It was so successful under Srila Gurudev. But this, and also when he came to the West, honoring all of the holy places that Prabhupada had been to, and to nourish and help nurture the Prabhupada disciples who had been without Uttama association for so many years. And also this speciality of Rupa Goswami, to propagate the literas of Rupa Goswami, interpret the literas of Rupa Goswami, and teach them and learn them, and thereby gaining access to the Leelas of Mahaprabhu, which is the access to the Leelas of Radha and Krishna. This is part of the glory of our illustrious Srila Gurudev. And when I think of just what chances in a trillion do I have of even stumbling across the literatures of Rupa Goswami, let alone having some idea, some shadow of an understanding of it. I mean, if I look at the probabilities of that, I think, wow, those probabilities are extremely small. So I just think, wow, I'm so lucky, which makes me conclude that, as I always do actually, that although it's endeavor and mercy, although it's endeavor and grace, is mercy and grace is such a larger part of our spiritual process. If we just keep, yes, we have to endeavor, and sometimes we don't feel like doing our practice or turning up for Sankirtan or turning up for this program or whatever it is. But you know what? I feel the most mercy comes when we don't feel like doing something and we turn up anyway. We turn up anyway because we know where the juice is, we know where the love is, we know where Gurudev is. And if we make ourselves available for that mercy, even when we don't feel like it, we will get the mercy, we will get that grace. Because we may be helpless, we're all helpless, but none of us are hopeless, because we have the most incredible, beautiful, compassionate, merciful, erudite, brilliant Srila Gurudev, who has nourished and helped all of us so much and continues to do so, because he is closer to us than the air that we breathe. Haribol, Dandavat Pranams, Haribol. I have a little sand left in my, not much, I have a little sand left in my egg timer.
I just want to say thank you so much, Yasodananda Prabhu, for glorifying Gurudev in such a beautiful and eloquent way. You know, Gurudev, you were speaking about not being hopeless, and you know, Gurudev used to, when he used to go back on his world tours, used to say, "I'm coming here to give you hope." And he is our hope. You know, he's got the key to everything that we need in getting to our goal, and he's given us our goal also. So we're really fortunate to have such an wonderful Gurudev, and a Gurudev that honors everyone so beautifully and loves everyone so the same, in the sense that he doesn't see no difference. You know, he just wants to help everyone, and this is the compassion and mood that Srila Gurudev had for all that came, everyone that came to him. It wasn't just that it's just my devotees, you know. He would be like that with everyone. So you've explained it so beautifully, and this concept of Rupa Goswami and knowing who Srila Rupa Goswami is, Gurudev did it in such a profound way. He made it so easy. He made it so easy to have a relationship with Rupa Goswami, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whoever it was, even Srila Prabhupada. So he's an amazing person. And actually, as time goes on, and I'm realizing this, like as time goes on, I don't realize how fortunate I am until I meet someone that hasn't met Srila Gurudev. Because when you're born or into the movement of Srila Gurudev, you take for granted what he's given, and then you realize that you speak to someone that is not so perhaps well versed, and then you realize, wow, this is what Srila Gurudev has come to give. So very, very lucky. So thank you so much.
Sorry, can I just add one thing? I just had a personal note came through. Someone said to me, can I share some personal darshans? And I just want to, so the question is, can I share something like my personal darshan with Gurudev? And I just wanted to answer that, because I had very short notice to prepare anyhow, but what I was thinking was that, I mean, normally I would imbue it with a lot more of my personal interactions with Gurudev, because I had so much association with him and so relishable. But actually, there are two ways to glorify Srila Gurudev. One is through our own experiences with him on the kind of Vapu level, and the other is on the Vani level of glorifying his instructions, his teachings. And sometimes it's nice to combine them both. But I felt very much in this that the personal way to express my relationship with Srila Gurudev is, what does personal mean? It's to my person. And who is my person? My person is me. And who am me? Me is my Swarup, and I don't know what my Swarup is. But actually this teaching and this exploration and this attachment to the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami and Rupa Manjari, that's going to help me realize who the me is. And so that's more personal than any external darshan. It's the internal realization of my experience that can help me have my Swarup realize that is the real person. That's the real personal for me. That's why I chose to speak like that.
Yeah, it's always good to have a balance of the two. I guess when you, for someone like me who hasn't spent many years with Srila Gurudev, it's always good to hear how he was and how he interacted and was with his disciples or devotees, because it paints almost a picture. But it's as important, like you said, to hear the other side of it. So both are very, very important, actually. And I know that we're going to move over to our next speaker, who hopefully will share some memories of Srila Gurudev. And the rest of the speakers will also speak about some memories and maybe perhaps intertwine the two.